We're back talking about how some simple math can turn the state of Georgia from red to blue. Joining me now, Congressman Steve Cohen. He's a Democrat from Tennessee. He's one of the few white members of Congress who represent a majority black district. And Stephen Walker, Executive Director of iVote, Democratic PAC, and former African-American Vote Director for the DNC's Organizing for American Project. And Stephen Walker, let me start with you. So having been around organizers, I'll spend a lot of time, I know there is a huge distance between numbers on a board of how many people are out there that might be able to be registered and actually doing that work. How do you close the gap between those two? Is it plausible to register the number of people you'd have to register and then turn them out to give Georgia a shot at being a competitive state?
Absolutely, Chris. First of all, it's a multi-pronged approach. As you know, registering people to vote requires an investment in resources and time and energy. So one of the things we have to make sure we have is a sustained and working Democratic Party in the state of Georgia, which we have a great party led by DeBose Porter and his fantastic staff and other members. It requires ongoing investment and engagement of the communities, because what tends to happen is we think about voter registration only around election time. Right. But it's going to require ongoing engagement with the community on a regular basis. Okay, so let's say you had that. I mean, what would the price tag for that be? I mean, what are you talking about? What kind of organization, what kind of dollars would have to be spent? As someone who, you know, has learned the lessons of the Obama campaign, which has probably been more successful in doing this than anyone else ever, what would that look like? Well, it depends. It could be hundreds of thousands of dollars. But I think one of the things that the Obama movement has shown this party and our community in general is the value of grassroots community organizing. So when we're getting people engaged on a neighbor-to-neighbor level, talking to their friends, and being the voice persons out there for making sure people are registered to vote, it can make a difference. But something like this is an investment in thousands of dollars to make it an ongoing process. Congressman, you're proof positive that the politics in the South don't have to be this kind of strict kind of racial black and white cookie where, you know, it's white folks voting for white Republicans, black folks voting for black Democrats. But what is the case is that redistricting increasingly, particularly run by Republicans, has sort of moved more and more black voters into smaller and smaller concentrations of the seats and has meant that we see less and less white Democrats in the South.
Ari Berman did a column in The Nation that was so perfect on redistricting. And the South had the Republicans had a program in the South, and I can't repeat the words. It was rat something, and they wanted to get rid of all the Democrats, really, and they redistricted in a way where in Tennessee, the next election, there may be only 5 of 33 state senators who are Democrats, only 1 of whom is Caucasian, because they tried to draw the districts in such a way that the black vote was spread out, and that the white vote was also spread out in certain ways. So redistricting has made it very difficult. But what Stephen's talking about, what Ben Jealous is talking about, is what Muhammad Ali talked about. Muhammad Ali is one of my heroes, and I've got a quote of his on my desk, and it says, "The fight is not won under the lights before the reporters. It's won with miles and miles and miles of road work and lots of punching the bag when nobody's viewing." Same thing with politics. You've got to get out there and register people in the off years and get prepared. That's when the elections are won, and you put your seed down and you till the soil. Stephen, what have we learned about the likelihood of turning someone to vote out once you've registered them? Because I remember reporting on this during 2008, and I was surprised at how high the percentage was that the Obama campaign was seeing in the folks that they registered and then stayed in contact with them and were able to actually get to the polls. Right, Chris, and that's exactly what I meant by the ongoing investment. So it's not just getting them fill out the voter registration card, but it is figuring out a process for regular communication with them. Whether them an email, whether it's calling them on the phone, whether it's sending a canvasser to go out and knock on the door, or most importantly, getting them to commit to vote and sending them a reminder card in the mail prior to the election to remind them that, yes, you registered to vote and you also committed to vote, and so now election day is here, and so now it's time for you to go ahead and cast that ballot. And evidence shows that when we get someone to commit to vote, they actually sign and say they're committed, and we send back that commitment, it definitely increases voter turnout. That is a great point. This is something that was found actually through experiments, right? That the commitment, the signing the pledge, and then sending it back to the person saying, you promised to do this thing, that actually statistically in experiments conducted, controlled experiments, you see that actually does bump up the rate of folks that vote. Right.
because what they get back in the mail is the pledge card that they signed with their signature on it that says, you made this pledge back on X date, and now it's Election Day, and now go out and cast your ballot on Election Day.
So, Congressman, there's two ways, I think, to think about the Democratic Party and the future Democratic Party in the South. One is the current stasis in which you basically have white majorities that elect white majorities that are Republican and conservative in state houses across the South, and in terms of the presidential electoral votes, and you have people of color who represent a minority of the state. Now, that's growing. So in the future, you can imagine a kind of majority-minority coalition that takes over. But in the interim, there is this question of recruiting enough white Democrats to build a majority in the South. How do you see that process unfolding in the near future, particularly amidst the Tea Party anti-Obama backlash?
It's going to be real tough in Tennessee, I think. The state has gone so far to the right. And when the Republicans did the redistricting, I mean, they were very, very devious. And particularly in my district, they took a certain section of people out that would cross over and vote for me because they supported me, even though there was a kind of a moderate to Republican area. But they took them out of my district because they didn't want them to be voting in the elections where they'd vote for other Democrats. And now they don't have a reason to vote, so they're not likely to vote at all in August. I think there are places like Georgia where there's been a large population shifts in the urban areas around Atlanta and other areas that with registration and with maybe bringing home, particularly how the refusal of Southern governors to extend Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act formula to people have really hurt people, both white and black. This isn't a white and black issue. And the Republicans have been refusing people basic health care throughout the South and many red states. The Republicans know it's about this getting people to vote. Otherwise, they wouldn't be passing laws to take votes away from people with what's really, you know, they're trying to stop you with these ID laws or to keep the vote quelled and stalled.
I'm glad you brought up the Medicaid expansion. We've actually got a story later in the week about building cross-racial coalitions on that issue. Congressman Steve Cohen and Stephen Walker from iVote, thank you much. That is all in for this evening.